Hi everybody, how are you? It's Avi Tenenbaum. Can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute, Shayla.
Sorry, I was nodding.
Can everybody hear me now? I changed my settings. You can hear me.
Yeah.
And you can see me. Can you
No.
see well? No, you can't see me. No. Okay. Having some issue here. Give me a second. I'm gonna re-plug in my camera. How about now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna, well, one more second. I'm writing a message to the police and we could start. Okay. It's a lot of planning going on, a lot of things, obviously. So I just came off of a Zoom with security forces here. Okay. All right, let's begin. How is everybody? Does anybody want to share how they're doing? Does anybody want to introduce themselves? Lisa, are you online, Lisa?
Yes.
Oh, that's you, Lisa. Hi, how are you? So you want to tell me who am I meeting with? Who do I have the pleasure of meeting? So I can get to know everybody.
I recognize a couple of faces, not everybody. There are various mental health, different mental health people from different organizations. Sheila actually at the top, that's my supervisor from Jewish Bereavement Counseling. Susie is another colleague of mine as well, who I work with. And I can't flick through everybody. Various different people from different organizations, different mental health practitioners from various organizations in the UK.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. I'm going to turn off the light in a second.
Thank you so much, Avi. I can't really introduce you. I couldn't introduce you previously, but just thank you so much for your time at this critical time, and we really appreciate you giving up your time to us. And looking very forward to what you have to share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet anybody, and if you want to say hi later on, you can get my WhatsApp, you can say hello. I'd love to know what everyone's up to, what your organization does. I do work all around the world. I refer people all over when things come to me. Okay, so it's 9:05 by me. It's 9:05 by me. My name is Avi Tenenbaum, and since the second Lebanon war in 2006, I've been involved on a volunteer basis, a paid basis, nationally and internationally. Give me 1 second. You can understand that. I'm listening also to the police and also to the ambulance service, and I'm also in touch with the army. It's a busy day. It's a busy day, so I have to answer if something comes up. Okay. I've been involved in the field of disaster behavioral health and psychological first aid since 2006. I've run national programs in Israel during war. I've been down south and up north during war. We're in a very, very challenging time. If you would have gotten a Zoom from me a few days ago, it would be a different Zoom than the one I'm giving today. And the reason why is because it's a dynamic situation that we're in. It's evolving every single day in a different way. Of course, it's hard to know exactly what's going on and how to interpret it, and I can only give you my interpretation. But the way I understand what's happening is as follows, and I feel this is just an important way to start, and then we'll get into the psychological first aid. I think what happened was Israel as a country was caught off guard 2 Saturdays ago, 2 Shabbats ago. We had a terrible tragedy and invasion. It took us time to realize what was going on, bring down forces, and it took us about 24 hours approximately to catch up. Imagine that there's a forest fire. I'm sure there are forest fires in the UK. And imagine a fire started and suddenly there's a massive fire spreading across town and everybody comes down from different areas in the country and they try to contain the fire. And so we did this in the south. It took us about 24 hours. I heard an official statistic from an army commander 25 minutes ago on a Zoom that we killed 2,000 terrorists within 24 hours. So even though we were caught by surprise and there were unbelievably terrible attacks, we caught up. And now we're in this interesting place where we're not quite sure as citizens what's going on next, although it seems like Israel's going to go into Gaza at any moment. But it's a dynamic story. If I would be giving a Zoom about the Grenfell Towers in the UK, for example, so it was a story that was horrific, but it finished. And then once it was finished, it didn't necessarily change. There were phases of that story, right? The Grenfell Towers burned. There was the initial trying to save the people, putting out the fire, supporting the victims. There was legal litigations and court cases after, every trauma event has its own phases, its own stages of the disaster, and people's needs change as you move along in the story. What's unique about war, or this war, is that it's an ongoing story. It didn't finish. In fact, it might be it barely even started. So I'm giving that as an introduction because we have to see what's going on, and please God, we'll be successful in restoring peace and security, and then everyone will be very happy. And if things aren't smooth, then we'll have a different scenario. And so I'm just prefacing that to say that depending on what exactly will happen and unfold, that's what will reflect the needs of the people that we're serving. I know all of you are involved in the mental health, healthcare system space, and depending on their personal relationship to this event, on an evolving event, right? Whether they have a child serving here or studying here, or they have family living here, or maybe just in general, part of people's identity as Jewish people, as Israeli people, people that were in Israel and then moved to the UK to start a business. Everybody has some sort of connection to the country, to what's going on, and it's part of our identity. So it's important to say that it'll be hard to tell you exactly how to serve your patients because we don't even know what's going to happen tonight. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And when whatever happens tomorrow, we don't know how we're going to fare with dealing with what happens. But please God, we'll be successful and we'll have a lot of reason to be happy. We'll have victory and nobody will have to watch this video and it will be great. So that's my prayer and my wishes. Okay. Let's talk about how to support people that are coming into your clinics, coming into your programs, and they're somehow affected by this story. Now, let's talk about a number of general scenarios. How are they affected by this story? And what can we do to help them? Because I understood that that's our goal tonight. And at any time, please ask me a question. Feel free to speak up. I'm a friendly guy. I won't bite. And the questions help shape the talk. So I don't just want to talk at you. If you have any inquiry, something interesting to you, just ask, please. I think everybody connected to this event from afar has experienced some traumatic stress. People are worried about what's going on. People are concerned about the country, about the soldiers, about their family, about their friends. There's a heightened level of anxiety. And on that general level, people are struggling. And then you have people that may or may not have developed symptoms of trauma, such as having intrusive thoughts, nightmares, being very, very sad, having a very deflated mood, having dread, not being able to eat, not being able to sleep, and so on and so forth. And in the world of trauma, when we talk about a car accident, so a car accident is a single incident. It happened, now it's over, and now we're supporting people after the car accident. But like what we said before, in this case, the car accident is still happening, or somebody's threatening to make with us a car accident. And so we're not out of the woods by any stretch. We don't have a sense of closure yet. We don't have a sense of safety. We're not even sure what to predict. In fact, there's so much not known that I think it heightens our anxiety, because when we're in the space of the unknown, our imagination imagines the worst. I was just thinking today, I was walking outside my house, and I was thinking, in a way, as an Israeli living here for 20-something years, I married an Israeli girl. We speak Hebrew at home. In a certain way, it might be worse today than tomorrow. Why? I feel like people around the world watching this event don't yet have something strong to hold on to for hope. If I would tell you tomorrow that we attacked Gaza in a surprise attack and we destroyed all of the Hamas operatives and all of their bases in 10 minutes, and it's incredible, just like we did in 1967 with, the enemy forces, in just a few minutes we destroyed their air forces. Imagine I told you that tomorrow, right? Imagine you got this incredible news, some sort of secret operation. We blew up the Iran the Iran nuclear reactor. We attacked in several places at once and we're winning. Incredible miracles, right? It would give us psychologically something to hold on to. It would give us a ray of hope. It would give us a sense of control. It would give us a sense of predictability. You can predict if we did this incredible attack, counterattack, right? Then we're winning and we would have high morale and it would be great. But right now, as of this moment, we just don't know what's going on. We're not Netanyahu. We're not the other ministers in the government. We don't understand. We don't know when. We don't know what. I think this adds to our anxiety. I think a lot of people now are waking up to a new worry. I'm going to say this as well. And of course, you'll talk individually with the people that you're meeting and know exactly what's bothering them. And I'm just speaking in general. We have rocket attacks, and that's certainly not pleasant. I would prefer we don't have them. And we have casualties from them, and we have psychological casualties from them. That's certainly true. And people's children and family are affected. Israel is affected. I think what's very unique to this conflict, similar to the Yom Kippur War, and not similar to anything else since then, is there's a sense of dread that a lot of people have been feeling. Dread that will be invaded on all sides by all sorts of enemies, just like they did that in the south. They're going to come in from Jordan. They're going to come in from Egypt. They're going to come in from Gaza again. They're going to come in from Syria and Lebanon. Israel has tons of borders. Israel is a very complicated country. And then within Israel, you have Judea and Samaria, Yehuda v'Shomron. The enemy people in the country are talking about how they want to do this. And a lot of people are waking up to this reality. And this is something new that, like I said, we haven't had a scenario like this since 1973. Even if you don't follow the news, I can tell you that is somebody asking a question? Okay, if not, let's make sure to mute ourselves. I could tell you that people are noticing that they're handing out machine guns in the streets. I could tell you, living in Israel more than 2 decades, I've never seen them hand out machine guns in the streets. They're not handing it out to everybody, but they're going town to town, giving rifles out to ex-military men who are not currently serving, just like you saw in the Russia-Ukraine war. You saw similar things in Kiev, trucks rolling up to towns, citizens picking up rifles, a sense of dread, a sense of fear. I know a lot of people are really struggling with this now. They're starting to understand that there's something very, very different about this conflict that we haven't had in all the other conflicts in decades. Also the fact that there's so many captives. Also the fact that citizens were killed. Okay? So it's qualitatively different. People have a heightened sense of fear. And we have to help people with that. Now, I could tell you, if this is helpful for anyone that you're working with, as somebody on the ground and as somebody that works with the security forces often, and I just had a meeting with them now, we're seeing incredible unity. We're seeing incredible support from around the world, whether it's donations, whether it's supplies, whether it's prayers, whether it's children making pictures, whether it's food. We are seeing incredible support. We're seeing unity. People are rallying together. And I could tell you on the level of physical security, I'm seeing incredible coordination between police, army, border patrol, and all the different relevant parties involved in creating security. And the reason why I'm telling this to you is not because I'm a news reporter, but because we're talking about creating a sense of safety with the people that we're talking to. And if we only let them think that everything is bad and we're all going to die, that's not good. We want to give them a feeling of hope, a feeling of security, a feeling that they're in good hands or their loved ones are in good hands, and to let them know that things are really happening well. There's good organization. I'm telling you for a fact, I know this firsthand. I'm fundraising money for weapons. I volunteer in the police myself on the side from doing this work. There's incredible coordination. Citizens, everybody is involved to make the community safe. I've never seen anything like it. So the threat is large, but the banding together is even larger, and it's incredible. It's breathtaking to see. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to see. And I'm telling that to people who are worried, because it's a true thing. When we do psychological first aid, we never lie to people. We never cover up the truth. The reason why is because A, we are moral people and we tell the truth. But B, the truth always catches up to people. So we don't want to belittle and play down a real threat in a challenging situation like the one we're facing. But absolutely, we're allowed to be hopeful, and we're allowed to use true information to give that information as a way of helping people understand what's going on. And it is true that people are incredibly organized and unified. It's absolutely true. I guarantee it with my stamp of my name on that. I know for a fact I just sat with 20 policemen in a Zoom before this. Okay? So that's hopeful and it's true. Now, I'm going to tell you something else interesting that I also didn't say in previous Zooms. I mean, I mentioned it briefly in a talk, I think, last night. I think that if you look around the professional Jewish world right now, there's a lot of material about psychological first aid, acute trauma, and I'm happy to address it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about trauma symptoms. We'll talk about how to help people work through them. I'm very happy to talk about that. But, however, there's a whole other set of tools that maybe as professionals we don't always value, but they're very, very powerful psychological resources. And that is lifting morale, spirituality, whether it's prayer, whether it's saying Tehillim, whether it's doing mitzvos. Okay, a lot of the people that you're going to meet are observant Jews, and they are tapped into a system of religion, spirituality, faith, meaning, and purpose. And we know psychologically that that's an incredibly powerful reservoir to help people transcend difficult times. And especially if a person is a faith-based person, right? They are a religious or spiritual person. It's absolutely okay psychologically. I'm not saying this is a religious Jew. I'm saying it's personal. It's absolutely okay to encourage them in a conversation to consider using their own spiritual beliefs, practices, rituals, and going to their own spiritual guide to get strength. Okay, and if I'm going to talk as a religious Jew and use those concepts for anyone that prefers those, having emunah and bitachon, having faith and trust in God, prayer, these are incredibly powerful reservoirs of resilience. Why is that psychologically true? Well, it's simple. Because the people that we're meeting, if they are people that are faith-based people, part of the faith-based community, they interpret everything in life as much as they can through religious beliefs. And so we can encourage them to use those same beliefs and tap into that pool of ideas to find strength in this situation, okay? That's one very powerful area of resilience that has to be tapped into people that's relevant to. Okay, in the American military and perhaps also in your military, who I very highly respect, by the way. I even have an SAS patch on one of my bags, by the way, just for coolness. Okay, there's a saying, there's no atheist in a foxhole. I'm sure you've heard that expression, but if you didn't, you heard it here. There's no atheist in a foxhole. And that means if you're being bombed, if you're being threatened, and you look for a higher power, and you rely on your higher power, it gives you strength. Okay? So I'm mentioning that because it's not mentioned enough in the talks that I'm seeing people give. And we're serving a lot of people like this. Oh, there's a request. Everyone should please mute themselves so there shouldn't be background noise. Unless, of course, if you have a question. Thank you. Okay, so we have psychological tools. I'm going to talk about those. We have faith-based tools. So I don't teach people those things because that's not my role, but they have people in their lives that they already look up to and trust, that they can refer to. And then we have lifting morale. Well, what's lifting morale? That's not a spiritual thing. I don't know if it's a psychological thing. Maybe it's a sociological construct. I'm not sure exactly what lifting morale is, But perhaps what that means is we human beings work in groups. We live in communities. We look at one another to see how people are affected by an event. I can tell you that there's empirical data that says that the way the same household goes through a tragedy, let's say the Maui fires, right? If the father of the household is struggling in the Maui fire disaster, it's obviously going to affect the children. It's going to affect the mother. If the mother is struggling, it's going to affect the father and the children. And that makes sense because those people live together. If you have college roommates, if you have girls studying in a seminary, the morale is so important. This is also not spoken about enough. I think the reason why is because morale is seen as an army construct, and it's less so talked about in a individual psychotherapy clinical setting, because if you're treating people in your clinic with OCD or marital issues, you're not usually going to talk about lifting morale. It's not very relevant. But when we talk about war, it's absolutely relevant. So that's another one of these ambiguous things that's incredibly powerful. I think this is the first talk that I'm saying this outright like this, so very important. When you see singers in Israel, I don't know if you've seen these clips of people like Yishai Rivo or Hanan Ben Ari authoring some sort of song, and then they're, a song about the tragedy or a song about lifting spirits, and then they go on army bases and they play the song for soldiers who are about to go and engage the enemy. That is incredibly empowering. And the reason why I'm saying this to clinicians is because as leaders in your community of mental health, as engineers of society in a certain way, because people look up to you for your ideas on how to shape society, it is absolutely imperative to lift morale. Okay? It is so important. I saw such a beautiful thing. Maybe you saw this, but I saw in one of the chats that I'm in, it was maybe the third or fourth day since the initial attack. A bunch of children, they cut out hearts. They took red pieces of paper, they cut out in the shape of a heart, and they wrote on it their name and a good wish to a soldier, and then they sent this to soldiers on the front lines. And these soldiers would hang up these hearts, they would staple them together or put a string through them and hang them up and tie them to their tanks and tie them to their cars and hang them around their base. And this gave them strength. And I want to tell you something else. It also gave those children strength. And the reason why is because the children feel they're doing something. They're doing something. And the soldiers feel the children are thinking of us and we're going to fight for them. Okay, so it's this interesting social dynamic where we all give each other some strength and we all work together. I can tell you the Talmud says the opposite. The Gemara says about a war, Tchilas Nefila Nisa. It says it's absolutely obligatory during war to watch morale, to improve and maintain morale, because the second you have people who are afraid and they're buckling under terror and their spirits are being broken, people get worried and they get overwhelmed and then they shut down. And when they do that, we're in grave danger. But the opposite is also true. When we lift morale, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Sderot, whether it's in Jerusalem, wherever we are, it gives everybody power, because on a certain level, we're all in this together. We're one big organism. We're one big organization. I know this for a fact. There were times since the beginning of the invasion that I was worried, and I have friends in Ukraine, non-Jewish friends in Ukraine, giving me support. So they're part of me, and they're giving me strength because they went through certain things recently, and they're sharing me their experience and strength, okay? So we're all in this together, and I'm mentioning morale to uplift spirits is no less important than to have clinical meetings with people, assessing them for trauma, seeing what their symptoms are, and giving some sort of intervention. All of these things together are important, whether it's faith-based, whether it's morale, or whether it's psychology. All of them together are important. Okay? Any questions until now before we jump into more details of some of these things? But if you do, please ask, okay? Okay. When we talk about a long, drawn out, difficult period, like the one that we're in now, and like the one that we're going to endure for 2 or 3 weeks, perhaps, maybe months, who knows? It's important to encourage people to understand that this is not a sprint, but this is a long distance marathon. All of our psyches are going to be somewhat diminished. It's tiring to be in this sort of situation. Okay? No matter what your connection is, it's tiring. It's taxing on the soul. It affects our bodies. It affects our minds. And it's hard and heavy to walk around this way for a long time. That doesn't mean that we're not being resilient. It doesn't mean that something is wrong. Right? Imagine if you and I were running a race that was 100 kilometers. After 80 kilometers, I mean, I would be tired after 1 kilometer, but imagine you're a professional, right? After 80 kilometers, you'd be bleeding in your knees, you'd be exhausted, you would have a paramedic trailing behind you to make sure you're okay and checking your heart rate. You would be profoundly impacted, yet you're winning the race. Right? So there's a toll that the nature of war has on people involved in it. Whether you're involved by watching the news or your family calling you up, or you're involved by raising money, or maybe you're not involved in any of these ways, but everyone in your community is involved, and you're like, wow, I can't stop hearing this news. Everywhere I go, in every kosher shop, they're playing the radio, and I'm hearing the latest updates, and everyone's talking about it. Die kvar, as they say in Hebrew. I can't handle it, right? Everyone's affected. But that doesn't mean necessarily that we're not being resilient. There's a professor named Professor Ann Maston in Minnesota in the United States. She studied resilience many, many years, Ann Maston. And she gives that analogy. She says, you can be very, very resilient and tired at the same time. It's not a contradiction because you're in a challenging situation and this war is taking a toll on you, with you and without your participation. It's challenging. Whether it's the news, whether it's your worry about somebody that you love, whether it's the responsibility of bringing in money for a campaign to equip soldiers with vests, whatever it is. There are so many people that are having the burden on their shoulders and they're going to be tired. And that's okay. That's okay. That's part for the course. That's part of the story. Okay? Since it's a marathon and not a sprint, therefore, all of us, especially you helpers that are serving the community, we all have to pace ourselves. We all have to tone slightly down whatever help we want to give to the community because we might be in this for a long time. And I hope I'm wrong. But we want any efforts that we're making to support people to be sustainable. And we want to tell this to our clients too. So that when you have a client who is struggling and they're busy raising money and they're going all over and they're giving phone calls and speeches and Facebook posts and they're doing whatever they can and it's a dire moment and it's urgent. Yes, it is urgent. Everything is urgent, but everything has to be done in a sustainable manner. You have to get sleep. You have to eat. Somebody will say, yeah, my children are in Beersheba. There are rockets there. I don't know what to do. Yes, don't worry about them. But we have to take care of ourselves and go through this challenging, elongated event that's going to take a few weeks or months. Hopefully I'm wrong. Sustainably. The tortoise wins the race. Right? That's the famous fable. That's the famous parable. The tortoise wins the race. In disaster, in a long, prolonged disaster, the tortoise wins the race. Perseverance, endurance, but to do it with self-care, to pace ourselves. Okay? Okay. Let's talk about acute traumatic stress. So, human beings, when they feel threatened, when they feel that somebody that they love or care about is threatened, whether it's true or imaginary, they feel trauma, right? When you get a parking ticket from the police, or however it works by you, you don't necessarily get traumatized, you get upset. But trauma comes from an existential, profound threat to one's life, or to somebody else's life, or to one's limb, or to one's property, to one's pet. It's anything that we highly, highly, highly value, and it's being threatened. Like we value our limbs, we value our children, we value Israel. Why do we value Israel? Everyone has a different reason. Some people are Christian and they're pro-Israel. Some people are Jewish and they're pro-Israel. Some people are not even Zionist, but they love Eretz Yisrael and they call it a different name and have a different relationship. But whatever it is, if you highly value this ethnicity that you're part of, this country that you visited, the people that you know, so we feel that it's under attack and this is going to profoundly affect us, okay? And that's traumatic stress. Now, here's what's tricky. What's tricky is, like I said before, what happens with traumatic stress is that, imagine, like we said before, there's a car accident. Imagine that people are all shaken up from the accident, and maybe they're not even injured. I can tell you I'm also a medic. I do a bunch of volunteer things aside from my professional hat. And I do that on purpose, by the way. I volunteer in the ambulance service, I volunteer in the police, I volunteer in search and rescue. The reason I do this is because I get to experience disaster firsthand from these different positions. So I can tell you that if you go to a car accident, 95% of the accidents that I go to as a medic, everyone's okay. Everyone's fine. But psychologically, they're not fine. Psychologically, they're frightened, they're shaking, they're throwing up, they're having nightmares, they're afraid to drive again. Physically, they're fine, but in their mind, somehow that event profoundly impacted their sense of security, okay? With acute trauma, for example, after a car accident, that person, their symptoms, if they develop symptoms, if they develop difficulty, it will start to dissipate 3 or 4 days after the event. There's something in the professional literature called acute stress reaction. In America, they're very into their DSM, but I know in the rest of the world, because the world isn't centered in America, I'm the first one to admit it, you have the ICD. And in the ICD, they talk about acute stress reaction. And what's acute stress reaction? It's the phenomena of how people react to trauma 2 to 3 days after an event. How do they react? The answer is in any possible way you can think of. Any and all ways you can think of. Their mood is very energetic, very deflated. They're very depressed, they're very angry. They have survivor's guilt. They have flashbacks, they have hypervigilance, they're jumpy, they're easily startled, they're confused. They have nightmares, they dissociate, etc., right? We say in the professional world that within 3 days after an event, that's normal. In other words, it's normal to go crazy. It's normal to go crazy. In the disaster behavioral health literature, they say it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. It's normal to not sleep for 2 days after a car accident. Okay, I supported somebody not that long ago in the world that the family experienced a suicide. You can imagine it's going to be very, very challenging for that family for the days to come, even for the weeks to come. We can understand that, right? But certainly 3 days after such an event, it's going to be very challenging for them. Right? I remember after the Meron disaster, right? Remember the Meron civil disaster in 2021? I remember there was a boy that died in a school, and all of his roommates were so traumatized that their own friend and roommate died in that disaster. They couldn't walk into the apartment for 2 to 3 days. They were afraid to walk in. And more accurately, they were afraid to see what they would feel when they would walk in, right? Because you're professionals, so I could say it to you that way, and you know what I mean. They were afraid of the reaction they would have to walk in and see the empty bed of their friend 2 to 3 days later. Okay, so that's acute stress reaction. Now, in the literature, we find that 3 days after, maybe 4 days after, people start to feel gradual relief. They start to feel a little bit better. Wonderful. If they still don't feel better and their symptoms and their difficulties persist for up to a month, then the DSM calls this acute stress disorder. Okay, so imagine a person, they're hypervigilant, they had that car accident, they still can't go in a car and drive, they're not willing to step outside their house, they can't sleep, they're crying all day for 3 weeks straight. Okay, that might be acute stress disorder. So clearly that person is stuck. Now, everyone is going to be sad after a loss. Everyone is going to be shaken up after a trauma event. We're not going to pathologize that. But we're talking about seeing a person that have no improvement whatsoever, and the third week is like the second day. That's what I'm talking about. Those boys who were not able to face the empty bed of their roommate, after the third or fourth day, they were able to go into the room. They went in together. Okay, and eventually that got easier and that got easier. And eventually they forgot about it and they rearranged the room and they got a new roommate and whatever they did. Okay, and that's what human beings do after a disaster. They adapt, they acclimate to the new reality, they rearrange life, they rearrange whatever it is, they rearrange the family, the room, and they continue, right? Now, if a person still has difficulty for 30 days and on, they have what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. We all know that from television and the radio. Everyone knows about PTSD. I remember as a young boy, I grew up in Chicago in the United States. I remember a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz who would have flashbacks in the middle of shul. He would yell out in German in the middle of shul, "Don't take me away, don't take me away." The man was 90 years old and he was still having trauma symptoms. I remember. Okay, so untreated PTSD, there are many studies in the world, especially coming out of Israel. It can go on forever. But the good thing is we can try to treat it, we can try to improve it. Okay, why did I just tell you all that information? Let's see how it's relevant to our case. First of all, maybe a major part of your role isn't even going to be now. It's going to be 6 months from now. When this war is finished, God forbid there should be no losses, there should be no tragedies. But you don't know what this war will bring. But for all you know, there's going to be an influx of people with post-traumatic stress disorder 4 months from now in the UK that were somehow affected by this event. They had properties in Israel that were destroyed. They had a child that was killed. Maybe they had no personal connection, like I said, but maybe some tragedy, God forbid, would happen, and they would see footage of this. I don't know, okay? But this is the time now to start learning, if you're not yet brushed up on PTSD and the professional treatment of it, to prepare for the influx of those cases if and when they come, okay? Now, to go to our war situation, like we said a few times in this talk so far, we're in an ongoing situation. It's like a abused woman whose husband is beating her up. So what are you going to say? She was traumatized only one time? Every day she's in a war. Every day she's getting yelled at, getting controlled, getting hit. It's an ongoing event. It's a multi-trauma ongoing event. Okay, that's what war is. So it's very hard for us to talk about how war affects people and when they're supposed to start feeling better. If you told me that today we had a victory, okay, and people are struggling a few days later, makes sense, right? But again, this is not a single incident event. It's very hard to understand, certainly when we're in the middle of it, what people are supposed to feel. And I think they're supposed to feel not good. It makes sense that they feel not good. They want to know everyone's safe. We don't have closure of this event. They want to know that we're going to win. Well, we have no idea what's going to happen because we didn't even do anything yet. So it's especially challenging. Now, even though it's challenging, and even though it's normal for us to be struggling, and it makes sense, and we can normalize that for people, of course, we can also help them to manage their symptoms. We can all learn practical techniques that we can teach people to learn how to regulate their emotions, right? Because you'll say, okay, Avi, you told me it's normal for people whose sons are serving in the army to be extremely anxious for the next 2 months until their son takes the uniform off. Okay. But practically, they can't sleep at night. It's normal, but they're struggling. They're suffering. What do we do? Okay, so we all want to have up our sleeves practical, actionable methods that we can hand people, that we can teach people, we can demonstrate to people on how to regulate their emotions, how to deal with all the different traumatic symptoms that come their way. Okay, somebody today in a WhatsApp group said they saw some horrific, gory video that Hamas just released of some, I don't even want to say, of them doing something to one of the victims in the initial attack. I don't know if that person is going to sleep tonight, but if they'll call me tomorrow and they'll say, Avi, I saw this video, I can't get it out of my head, I don't know what to do, I have a few ways where I can teach them how to manage that. Okay, so we want to have ways to manage that. I know that as psychotherapists, everybody has a different clinical orientation. Some people do a lot of process work, psychodynamic work. Some people are very CBT based. But it's definitely important in these days, in situations like this, we want to have intervention that's fast acting and it's easy to do. And we could teach it to the patient and let them take it home. Even in your communities, if you want to teach them something, you can make a video. You can make a 3-minute video. You can show them how you suggest that they breathe. If they're extra anxious, whatever it is, creating content like that for your community is wonderful. Handing them a tool, handing them something easy that anybody can do at any time, and then empowering them to do it. And that's the type of stuff that I love to do. I can tell you professionally, because this is a group of professionals, so we could talk in a different way. I personally am very connected to acceptance and commitment therapy, if you've heard of it, and to mindfulness-based therapies. And I like teaching metaphors from ACT, and I like teaching very, very simple mindfulness techniques that anybody can do at any time, several times a day, when they're feeling extra anxious, when they can't stop thinking about the gory video that they saw yesterday, when they're up at night and they're super hyper vigilant, jumping up and down in their bed and they can't relax, etc., etc. We want to have a strong toolbox for all these people. Okay. I think it's important for us to learn as professionals, I guess, a toolbox of what a person is feeling and match an intervention to what they're feeling so that you have a solution for everything. I'll give you an example. If somebody comes to me and says, I can't stop thinking about these negative thoughts that everybody in Israel is going to die. Okay? So we want to have an intervention for that. I noticed myself, for example, I noticed the last few days, every time I spoke to one of my kids, I thought in my mind, this is the last time I'm ever going to speak to my children. Okay? Which is a crazy way to think. I was catastrophizing, right? I was catastrophizing in my own mind, subconsciously. And I spoke that out with a psychologist friend of mine. And I realized I was doing that. And I was able to catch that. And I was able to now approach my children and tell myself, this is not the end. This is not the end. This is not the last time. No, this is not the last time. No, it's not the last time. Right? Okay? So it's it's important for us, obviously, as clinicians, to work with people and understand specifically where they're blocked, replace cognitions. If they're up at night at 3 a.m. and they're so nervous about what's going on and they can't let themselves go to sleep, and at any minute their son and Gush Etzion might call them, and so they can never turn off their phone and they can never let their guard down. Well, that's unsustainable, right? We want to try to help patients figure out a sustainable way where they can get sleep. They can create some sort of system where if something would happen, they can be notified, but otherwise they can let their guard down a little bit. We can let them know you're in this for the long haul. You need to get sleep. If you're up at 3 a.m. and you can't go to sleep, your body's filled with adrenaline. Your body's filled with all these hormones, and you're so full of energy, you can run a race. But you have to go to sleep. What do? So we want to have some techniques. We want to sit and teach them maybe how to do a body scan, for example. How to teach them how to do simple mindful breathing and to relax. Maybe to make a warm tea and hold it and notice the feeling of the warmth in their hands and see if that's calming. To have a nice green warm tea in their hands, right? We want to figure out any way that we can help them manage their acute stress. Needless to say, by the way, a lot of people are re-traumatizing themselves several times a day because they're popping into the news. They're popping in on WhatsApp, on Telegram, on Instagram, wherever they get their news from. And they're seeing videos in doomsday reports and predictions and, the king of this Arabic nation said, death to Israel, and he threatens this and that. People are seeing this 25 times a day, 50 times a day. That's not helping anybody. So we can encourage having less media exposure. People are going to say, yeah, but I want to know what's going on. So we can try to negotiate that with our patients. We can say, yes, it is important to know what's going on to a degree. It is important. You want to know what's going on, so maybe you can go to the news and you can look at just, the news briefs and quickly glance through it twice a day. And anything you really need to know, you'll see. What do you think about trying that? Or my favorite technique is we can appoint somebody who's willing to re-traumatize themselves all day and let them tell us the news. Why do I have to check the news? Right? You go to your friend, you say, hey, if you see anything really, really, really important that you really think I need to know, tell me. Otherwise, please don't tell me. But if there is something I need to know, tell me. Okay, let them do it. Their problem. But media exposure is another element that's exacerbating people's stress, worries, anxieties. It's creating all those cognitions in their mind like, oh, this is the last time I'm going to speak to my child like I had. Why did I think that? Because I saw 150 pieces of news about how we're all going to die. Because that's good for the news, right? And I'll tell you, when I noticed that that was happening to me, I basically stopped looking at my phone. And now, any WhatsApp group that's important to me that I have to listen to has a certain sound. And if I hear that sound, I'll open my phone. If I don't hear that sound, I could care less. I will not look at the phone. If there's something important that I need to know, I'll hear it. And if not, life goes on as usual. I think part of trauma also is disruption, unpredictability, the unknown. And I think part of resilience is predictability, continuity, routine. I could tell you my kids, we had a big rocket attack here 2 days ago. Rockets exploded right near my house. And the kids came out of the bomb shelter, and my kids were saying, what should we do? And I said, what should you do? You should go play. You should go play. You were in the middle of playing in the park. The only reason you stopped was because of the rockets. The rockets are done. Go play. Routine, continuity, predictability. I was sitting last night with my daughter. She's 14 years old, and she had to do a book report for school. And her English is not very good, and mine is because I'm a Native American born in America. And she had to write this in English for school. So she said, Dad, can you sit down with me and help me type this paper? So I'm sitting doing schoolwork with her from 10:30 at night till 11:30 at night, typing on Google Documents this whole book report. And part of my mind said to me, are you seriously sitting with your daughter and doing a book report? You should be outside patrolling right now with a rifle. And then I said back to myself, you know what? Somebody should be patrolling with a rifle. If I need to, I will. But right now, my daughter has a book report, and the show must go on. And I'm going to act normal as much as I can. And I'm going to create continuity as much as I can. Okay? So those are important things to do that help us develop resilience in our families. Okay? When the war first broke out, I said, let me cancel all my clients. I don't know what's going to be. And then I said, why should I cancel any of my clients? I'll have every single client until I can't. The opposite. The show must go on. Okay? So all of this is very important. Routine is very important. Let's talk about, I'm not teaching you on purpose specific interventions because you're all psychotherapists and you know 100 different ways of calming people down. I know that you do. I could tell. Okay? But if you do want to see some ways that I use with people that I'm sure you know them anyways, you can go on my website. I can send to Lisa also the link. On my website, psychotraumaunit.com, psychotraumaunit.com. I have a free downloads page with 15 infographics. And I have very, very simple pieces of information, very interesting things there that are very easy to implement. I encourage you to read all 15 of them. It's very short, each one. And you might be able to hand them out to people or borrow some of the ideas. Let's talk about social support for a moment. I think one of the most underappreciated tools that human beings have when they're going through something hard is social support. And I think one of the most important interventions that a psychologist can do with a person going through a traumatic situation like the one our community is facing is we can encourage and invite people to create social support. And I'll give you an example. So let's say there's Mrs. Goldberg, and she lives in Manchester, and her nephew is fighting in the army, and she's worried sick about him. And she is restless, and she doesn't know what to do with herself, and it's affecting her mood, and she can't work, and she calls your organization, and she asks for help. So yes, we can sit down with her. We can do psychological interventions with her. If I sat down with Mrs. Goldberg, maybe I would teach her some mindfulness. I would teach her some mindful ways of realizing that she's thinking every single moment about how her nephew will die. And she can notice when she does that, and then she can try to gently bring herself back to something neutral in the here and now. She can smell something. She can look at something pretty. She can hear the sounds around her in the room. She can notice her breath coming in and out. Okay, those are all, psychological interventions. Wonderful. But social interventions is as follows. The social intervention is, I would invite Mrs. Goldblum, or whatever her name is already, I forgot her name, Mrs. Goldblum, to pick a friend or a family member to make a ritual every single day at X time. They're going to make a tea or a coffee, get on a Zoom, and drink it together. Okay, so let's say every single day at 10 a.m., she's going to call her cousin in South Africa, who they're very close, and they're going to just sip a drink together and just make small talk. And they don't have to talk about anything specific, and it doesn't have to be heavy, and this is not a therapeutic process group, and she doesn't have to share all her feelings. It's as simple as, I'm going through something hard, but now I know I'm going through it with somebody else. I'm sharing the pain with somebody else. There's a saying in Army psychology in the United States. There's a very wonderful Army psychologist named Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He has fascinating books about the psychology of being in war as a soldier and the psychology of killing other people. because army psychologists help veterans deal with the experiences that they killed somebody else, and that's very hard for people. Anyways, in his books, he talks about the idea that shared pain is divided pain. Shared pain is divided pain. When I go through something, I feel overwhelmed. When I share it with you and you just listen, I feel like I'm not going through it alone. You don't have to be a psychologist, you just need to listen. We can also, by the way, you might get all sorts of people asking you how they can support their family in Israel. That might come to your clinics as well, right? They have children in Israel who are scared. How do they support them? So I remember a few months ago, I discovered a YouTube channel. I'm forgetting the full name of the channel, but I know that part of the name is Listening Tables. I think it's called Orly's Listening Tables. I'm not sure. But it's a very cute channel, and it's as simple as this. There's a guy named Orly or Aura or something like this, and he opens up a table anywhere in the world, and he says, you can sit down here for free, and I will just listen, and you can say anything. And he practices listening to people. And people really sit down and share stuff, and he just listens. He doesn't give them advice. He doesn't tell them what to do. He just listens. So anybody that comes to us and says, how do I support my kids in Israel? Not all of us have to be brilliant psychologists and know all the answers to support somebody. Even just listening to somebody, just letting them talk, just letting them share, non-judgmentally, using active listening is so powerful. Using our presence so that they feel that they're not going through it alone. They have backup. There's somebody in the background behind them. And that changes their whole experience. I told you I have non-Jewish friends in Ukraine who I actually visited not that long ago in Ukraine. I did some psychological first aid work there. And they gave me a lot of support. I have a friend in Muncie, New York, who gave me a lot of support. I feel I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I have these friends. They care about me. They check in with me. When we talk about checking in with people, we have to encourage people not to be overburdening, right? People don't need to give you half an hour of their time if you check in with them, right? If you want to support your child in Israel, all you need to do is say, hey, I'm checking in. That's it. You just need to let them know you're available. It doesn't mean they have to sit down now and talk to you for an hour, right? In fact, we find in empirical literature that even just the offer to offer somebody else some help and support is very powerful. If I offer you, hey, I know it's really tough over there. I'm following everything that's going on. I'm praying for you. If you ever need anything, just call me. If you ever want to vent, you want to talk, you need a favor, just message me. Okay? We can tell that to people. And the offer itself is therapeutic. It's caring. It conveys somebody cares about me. I'm worthy of being cared for. Very powerful. There's going to be all sorts of very, very, very niche, specific topics that are likely going to come to some of you in the days to come and the months to come. If you're working with refugees, because let's say people were living in Modi'in and now they came back to the UK to be with their parents, so then they're displaced people, that's disruptive. Maybe the kids don't even know English that well. Even if they do, they left their friends back at home, they left their house and familiarity back at home. There's going to be those issues that you're going to be on the lookout for. Maybe you'll be supporting refugees. We don't know what's going to happen. To be quite honest with you, it could be Hezbollah at any moment is going to send thousands of rockets in Israel. We're going to have many uninhabitable homes. People are going to have to be displaced. As it is now, you have thousands of displaced people in Israel. People from the south are all over. People in the north are all over. I know that a lot of people are going back to the diaspora, so you might meet people like that. there's going to be people with survivor's guilt that might come your way. You know, how come I got out in time and they didn't? How come my friend died and I didn't? There's going to be that type of stuff. Some people are going to have existential spiritual questions. How come God is doing this? Which you may or may not be a spiritual leader, but it might come to you. You have to figure out how are you going to navigate that. And by the way, the easy way to navigate that is, first of all, see if they're even asking a question. Maybe they're just expressing their pain. Maybe they're just saying something rhetorical. And what's your job? Is to listen, to validate. And maybe they're asking a very specific spiritual question. That might also be. Maybe they want and seek a philosophical answer. Well, maybe. So try to determine that. And if that's what they want, then refer them to the rabbi, refer them to whoever it is that can provide them a philosophical answer. Okay? You're going to have students. I heard about this today in particular from somebody. You have a lot of students that were studying in Israel that went back. A student today told me, he's in America, he said, for a lot of us kids, it's like the second round of Corona. I said, what do you mean? He said, because in Corona, there wasn't school, and we were all sitting at home, and we weren't sure what to do with our time, and people were getting in trouble, and people were getting bored, and people were getting depressed, and people were using drugs. He said that's what's happening right now to a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. They were supposed to go from Sukkot back to Israel to study in yeshiva, study in seminary. And this event unfolded on Simchat Torah. And now they're stuck at home. Well, what are they supposed to do now? So they're waiting around. Some of them are regressing to previous issues that they had. They're looking at pornography. They're smoking marijuana. They're drinking alcohol. They're bored. Their friends are here. They're there. They feel they're missing out. All the whole package, all of that stuff. That's also happening right now. Okay, and that's the educational element of the struggle in your community right now. And maybe you guys as leaders in the community might want to be on the lookout for that population. That's a different population. And those people need support to have some sort of framework of study. Oh, one moment. That's the police. One moment. I'm sorry, just one second. עבודה נכונה, ירי, גוף שונים, טיפול, מלחמה, just sending them a message. מעוניין, אשמח לפרטים. Okay. See, that's an example. I don't look at my phone. If it makes that sound, it means I have to pay attention. Otherwise, I don't care. Okay. You know, there's a lot of organizations that have written material about disasters. For example, in America, you have the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. It happens to be a very nice website, National Child Traumatic Stress Network, the NCTSN. They have tons of written material about suicide, about gang violence, all sorts of interesting things you can read about when it comes to trauma and how it affects families. One of the things that these clearinghouses of disaster trauma stuff, one of the things they do is they write papers about specific populations, right? So let's say the Maui wildfires, which I was involved in a little bit recently. So it affected everybody, that's true. But how did it affect children? How did it affect the elderly? How did it affect first responders? When you ask particular questions like that, you sometimes get very unique answers, and then you can tailor a very unique intervention or create a resource for that population. I would encourage you in the UK to do exactly the same thing. Like we said, we have yeshiva and seminary students sitting around bored to death doing nothing, dabbling in drugs. Okay, we have to do something for them. We have people who are displaced, perhaps. Let's see how to support them. We have people that their children are fighting in the IDF. We have to make some support group for them. And by the way, in Israel, there are online support groups in English for that. So you don't necessarily have to duplicate your own resources. It could be they can join I saw today on Get Help Israel. Get Help Israel, they have some sort of online support group with a South African psychologist for people whose children are serving in the IDF. There's a lot of lone soldiers from the UK. There's no doubt that there's soldiers like that. Right? There's all these subpopulations. We want to make sure we cover all the bases. We want to make sure that everybody has what they need, and we didn't forget about somebody. Let's think what else. Let's pause and ask questions. Okay, I just randomly spoke at you now. I gave you an onslaught of ideas. I see a question. Yeah. Somebody's raising their hand. Sheila.
Yes, I've raised my hand. Thank you very much, Abby, for your time and your thoughts and your ideas. And clearly you're so preoccupied in so many different ways. I suppose what strikes me especially is this is a collective trauma. So we're thinking about our clients and patients, whatever you call them, but where so many people are experiencing it themselves.
Sure.
And I think your parallel that you just mentioned with the youngsters about the pandemic was quite interesting, because suddenly all safety nets and security had gone out of the window and we were all in the same boat, you know.
Right.
And of course, we have it very differently from you. You're right on the throes of it. From the diaspora, we have other sort of issues. You'll know, as you said, you've been hearing the news. We've got all sorts of things going on. And I think that's why it's so important that we meet in situations like this. And I just want to say to everybody that I think your social support, we should think about it in professional terms as well, whether it be supervision or group support, those of you who have common themes. I think it really makes a lot of difference, because the isolation that you feel, even though you're in a collective situation, yours is not quite theirs and theirs is not quite yours. So you need to be able to bounce ideas off each other and support each other in that way. So I just
Well said. Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then by you continuing to talk together and make some sort of forum, you'll also be able to be abreast on the developing needs of your community, and you'll be able to share your own personal experiences, and it will be very, very important. And like what we said, this is an evolving situation. It's even if we had victory tonight, we're going to be affected by it for weeks after. All the different ways that that's going to show up, and so it's important to be in touch. That's a very important point. So any questions about anything at all? Don't be shy. Anything. By the way, I made a 4-hour talk for people in Israel on how they can show up to the scene of a disaster here in Israel during the war and give psychological first aid. I put it for free on my YouTube. You can check it out. And I didn't teach that to you because I'm imagining that the type of work that you're doing might be more general and clinical. However, again, I have no doubt that you guys are also going to be on the front lines of working with bereaved families. These are things that are going to come your way, and you're going to want to learn about what resources your community has to support those people if they turn to you individually 3 weeks later because their son was killed in this war. How do you help them process that loss? How do you help them grieve? Creating community resources so that even if you receive somebody like this, for all you know, somebody's running a group, you can connect them to other people in a similar situation. You can, like Sheila just said, you can have peer supervision with other people working with the same sort of population. You really want to be on top of this because it's very complex. There's a lot of things around the corner. That is kind of like what I feel like I'm repeating it over and over, but I didn't say this in my other talks, but when I'm speaking to a group of clinicians, there's a bunch of stuff around the corner, and we want to anticipate what it is and prepare for it. Any questions? One of the things that I talk about in my handouts on my website, and again, I encourage you to look at it, psychotraumaunit.com at the at the free downloads page. One of the things I talk about is that in our bodies, we have an alarm system. And when we feel trauma, we're alarmed, we're awake, we're making sure everything is okay, right? And so we're acting differently. It's like I like to give people an example. If I bought a new Tesla car and it's very expensive, I don't want anybody to steal my Tesla car. And so I'm going to install a car alarm, right? Now imagine some person in the street leans on my car, lights up a cigarette, and starts smoking while he's sitting on the hood of my car. The car is going to sound the alarm. The car is going to sound the alarm because the car doesn't understand whether the man smoking the cigarette is going to steal the car or he's just using it to lean on to smoke a cigarette. As far as the car is concerned, there's a threat. And his job is sound the alarm. Tell everybody something's happening. I think with trauma, that's what happens to us as well. And I think that even if everything is okay, even if we have kids in Jerusalem and they assure us everything is fine, mom, dad, everything is okay, it's really safe here, we barely get any rockets, nothing's going to happen, it's fine. And they assure you, we might still feel anxious, we might still feel worried. And that's okay. That's okay. We can know on the one hand in our minds that things aren't as bad as we thought they'd be. And our bodies can react differently too. And it's not a contradiction because we have our mind and we have our hearts. We have the rational mind and we have the emotional level of existence. Emotionally, we can be worried about our kids, which is a great parental instinct, right? It helps us raise generations of human beings. It's built inside of us. We can be worried about our kids. We can be worried about our nation. We can be worried about Israel as a country, whatever your relationship is to this event. And, you know, you could be worried about anti-Semitism in your own communities. I know that that's also something that's on your minds that I didn't mention until now. I know what's going on because I'm speaking to people around the world. I know that people around the world are very worried right now about terrorists coming into their synagogues and shooting people and this type of stuff. I know what's going on. Even if the police chief or his representative sends a public release to the Jewish community that he quadrupled the security in the neighborhood and they have no intelligence that there's any foul play and they're doing their utmost to protect the community and everything is going to be okay. Even after that, it's okay that we're nervous. It makes sense that we're going to be nervous. The fact that we have information about something doesn't immediately take away what we feel. It's okay to feel nervous because we're in a challenging situation and our alarm has been sounded. And until we have enough safety, our alarm is going to keep going. Until that man gets off the hood and stops smoking the cigarette on my Tesla, the alarm is programmed to still go. Until we have many weeks of peace and forget about the war and get all of the people who were taken captive back and finish telling all the different stories on the radio about this war. And we get so sick of it that we're finally done discussing it and move on. Until then, we might feel upset. We might feel unsettled, restless, and that's okay. Because until we forget about it and until it's over, and by over, I don't mean the day where we win, until it's over so much that the last refugee went back home and started school and it's a month later. You know, by the way, people's businesses are going to be impacted. There are people in the UK that own businesses in Israel. They're involved in tourism. There's people in Israel whose businesses are impacted, and they're the children of people in the UK. There's all sorts of things. There's too many for me to remember at once. This is the only talk I gave in the last 10, 11 days where I'm thinking of all these different scenarios. But it's just, this is what I'm hearing clinicians helping people with, all this different stuff. This big hodgepodge, this smorgasbord of problems. of all types. So I think it's important for us to be aware of all the myriads of ways that it affects people, and as a community, get organized, anticipate what's going to come next, be prepared for it, have resources. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you already have resources, make sure everyone else knows about them. If there isn't something, make sure to create it. If there are certain populations that aren't going to receive regular services, but they need those services, perhaps people that speak Yiddish in your community might be affected in some way. And maybe there's no services for them. I was never in the UK. I'm making that up as an example. I have no idea. But we want to make sure we cover all the bases. Maybe there's an ultra religious sect that doesn't feel comfortable always getting psychotherapy, but all their kids are studying in Israel. Well, maybe there's a way to help them if we get on board the people in their community that know how to work with that population and give these ideas in a culturally safe manner. So again, we want to be really on top of this. And please God, by everyone doing their part, we're going to get through it. My friend in Muncie warned me. He said, Avi, you're giving that talk tonight. Give a hopeful talk. Stop being so scared. Give a hopeful talk. I want to be a little bit hopeful. I told you in the beginning, and I'll tell you now, I'm seeing such incredible unity, organization, coordination. It's unbelievable. And it's felt here. I feel it. I feel it. And it's enjoyable for me to meet all of you. I've never met you before. I don't know any of you, not even one of you. It's rare. Usually I know somebody. I don't know any of you. Look how we are as a nation banding together. Look how I get to meet people that you're busy helping the people in your communities. They look up to you. They look up to you for your guidance. If you have any questions, maybe after this talk for the next few weeks, you're having an initiative, you have a question, just ask. Because that's my job and that's my pleasure, okay? And if I know about the topic, if I can help you guide something, figure something out, I'm happy to do it. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, hi, Avi. Thank you
Yes.
so much for this incredible presentation. It's been so informative and extremely supportive. I have one question. I don't know if it opens up something bigger, and if it does, please say. I'm just wondering if we have clients who come to us and what's going on now is triggering some historic personal trauma of theirs that perhaps they work through or perhaps has never been touched on before. What angle, how do we approach that?
That's a great question. Thank you. And that's definitely going to happen for some people. And it's really interesting because for some people, this crisis might not even be the worst part of what's going on for them, but like what you said, it's going to revisit something else for them. What's the best angle? I mean, I think it's important as a clinician to try to interview the patient and try to understand the exact nature of where they're stuck, where they're worried, what's concerning them, what's upsetting about this event for them, to really get down there and really try to understand what it is. Make no assumptions at all. I'm trying to think of an example, if I had any examples like that in the last few weeks. I was speaking to a young man today who he struggles very much with his Jewish religious identity. On the outside, he's completely religious. On the inside, he doesn't keep any of the mitzvahs. He's very confused. He's not sure, his affiliation with Judaism. He's all upset at he's upset at his parents. He's upset at his community. He feels that they kind of do things in an external, shallow manner, and it's not really serving God. And he's got this whole thing on his shoulders. And I've been working with him on this, and he's trying to figure out who he is and what's his association with Judaism and this type of thing. And I can tell you, I spoke to this fellow today, and this war for him was an incredibly uplifting and meaningful event that helped him solidify his Jewish identity. And in a way, for him, it was very important that this war happened. because the war happened, he was able to see who's truly the friends of the Jewish people and who isn't, and what matters and what doesn't, and how all of our prayers count, and how everyone's joining together to help the soldiers. You know, so for one person, the war might be terrible. For this guy, the war was like, it gave him all this insight. It helped him understand more about who he is, what type of person he wants to become, what decisions to make, what type of future to shape. And I never would have known that in my life had I not spoken to him about this. So I'm not sure how to answer your question other than that, other than it's going to profoundly impact everybody differently. I remember a case here in Israel where one of my colleagues went to a suicide. And, you know, you walk into a house where a father took his life and you assume that everyone is broken and they're shocked. And my colleague says to the spouse, like, I'm so sorry for what happened. And the spouse says, sorry, he was the worst person I ever met. Good riddance. Okay? Apparently he was a very abusive man. He mistreated his family. It caught up to him and he killed himself. But for her, she was happy. It was relieving. And the lesson is not to assume. Not to assume. Never assume. In psychological first aid, by the way, at all, and I speak about this a lot in my 4-hour talk on YouTube, we never assume anything in this type of work. We don't assume that everybody's traumatized or worried just because their son is in the army, just because they have a house in Israel, just because their kids are studying in seminary. Everybody's different. Some people are allowed to not feel anything. Some people are naturally resilient. Everybody's different. I think it's disrespectful when we approach a patient and assume something about them, right? I remember when I was in Shidduchim, this is a silly story, but I remember when I was in Shidduchim, my rabbi recommended that I speak to a certain, shadchan, certain matchmaker. And so I went to the shadchan, and this woman asks me, "Nu, what type of girl are you looking for?" So I say one sentence, and in the middle of my sentence, she says, "You should date so-and-so." And I felt so insulted, like, you didn't even let me finish my first sentence. You already think you know who I am, and you're already matching me with a girl. You think I'm going to trust you? You don't even know me. Now, the funny part of the story was, she said my wife's name, I ended up marrying her, and we have 5 kids. Okay? That's the funny, unexpected part of the story. So she was right. She was just a really big expert. She made like 70 shidduchim in Israel. But the point is, we never assume anything. We never assume nothing. There are people that are going to come to you, by the way, who feel guilty that they don't feel bad. There are people like that too. And you're a mental health professional, so they'll say, is it okay that I don't feel bad? Or there's going to be other people that they felt worried and they did something to calm their nerves and they feel guilty that they're doing that. They're playing mahjong. They're playing Risk. They're watching David Attenborough nature videos in order to calm their nerves and go to sleep at night. And now they feel guilty because there are boys fighting on the front lines, and I'm going to watch a David Attenborough video about penguins? How dare I? And we're going to have to help them navigate those situations. Which, by the way, just to throw a word on that, I think it's completely okay. I think if we're apathetic to other people in pain, that's morally wrong. But I think that if we're struggling and we know that for self-care, watching a penguin video is going to help us be healthy, stronger people, I think that's wonderful. I think I have to watch some penguin videos, to be honest. Maybe tonight I'll watch a penguin video. I'll let you know. Okay, so that there's, I feel like in this talk, this is the only talk I did this, just an open conversation with you guys. There's so much directions that this event is going to take, but please God, we're going to hear good news. Please God, we're going to have more to hold on to. We're going to understand more about what's going on. I started thinking for myself that every hour that passes is an hour closer to the end. That helped me to feel good. I think Helen Keller has a quote, but if it's not from her, so forgive me, you can look it up. Every storm runs out of rain. Does anyone know? Am I misquoting it from her? Is it from somebody else? Every storm runs out of rain. Every storm runs out of rain, right? Every hour we're closer to the end. We're seeing who we are. We're seeing the beauty of Am Yisrael. We're seeing the beauty of humanity. It's not only about Am Yisrael. We're seeing people that are supporting Israel that are not Jewish. Plenty of people like that as well. We should hear good news. I'm around. As far as I'm concerned, anyone here can message me. Any sort of question, I'm around. If I can answer, I will. I get a lot of messages a day, so forgive me if I don't. But I'm super happy to be in touch. Thank you for the honor of me talking to you. We should hear great news. Thank you, everyone. Be well, and I'll try to record this, upload it, and send it to you later so you can share it, okay? Thank you, guys. Be well. Good news. B'sorot tovot.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and to anyone that organized this, sent it out. Thank you to everybody that was involved in this idea. We really appreciate it. It was nice for me too. It's nice to just talk to people and meet such lovely people. Thank you. Be well. Bye.